Hello, peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to Universal God Message of Peace. I'm Lale Tunser, and today we have with us Tom Shanti. Tom is a former Buddhist monk. He's a yoga instructor, Tai Chi Gong teacher, a musician, plays for a band, Eternal Sea. He also does sound healing and all sorts of lovely things for our community in Shropshire. So we're very blessed to have him today with us. And the topic we're going to be talking about today, while listening to Tom Shanti, is the topic's called Religion as a Method, as a Means to an End. So over to you, Tom.
Okay. So namaste. Welcome to this podcast, this talk. So I've been asked by Lali to speak a little bit about, my experience as a Buddhist monk, for one, and also my understanding of religion as a method. So a method, a means to an end, rather than the end itself. So that brings to mind an analogy from the Zen Buddhist tradition of the finger pointing at the moon. Okay, so the teachings, spiritual teachings, are believed or said to be like a finger pointing towards the moon. Now, the actual truth, the spiritual truth itself, is the moon, and the finger is the teachings. So, do we worship the finger that's pointing or the moon itself? If the moon represents the divine truth, is it better to just see where that finger is pointing, or to start worshipping the finger? Yeah. So when we start worshipping the method itself, making that completely an object of veneration, which we can do, and all religions do that, including Buddhism, I must add. Like we have our Dharma texts. There's a Dharma text, for example, and we would avoid putting it on the floor. We'd have a respect for it. And also the teachers in Tibetan Buddhism, they put the teachers literally on a pedestal. They're on a pedestal with beautiful brocade. It's a little throne, if you like, and there's a risk in that. And many times it's gone wrong. Many people have got drunk with the power of being seen as a living Buddha or a living enlightened being. So it's very common for that to go wrong, and yet they still do it. And yet it has a meaning and it has a purpose. Just like we might put the book, we might wrap it up in beautiful brocade and put it on a very high place and revere that book. And yet, people have been killed as a result of harming a book. In many religions, this has happened and continues to happen. So again, it's better to just see the book as a very venerable object, and it's pointing towards the truth. Dharma is the teachings of Buddha, and also in all the what's called the Vedic or the Dharmic religion. So you've got Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. They all talk about this concept of Dharma. Okay, Dharma is a Sanskrit word, and it means that which holds. It's the literal meaning, but it has so many other meanings: the teachings, the truth, the protection, and so many things. So the Buddhists taught that Dharma is a medicine to relieve all mental pain. So when the Dharma is pure and unpolluted and given freely without any ego grasping or any corruption, then that Dharma will be liberating, it will be medicinal, and it will heal the people, and it will heal our minds. And so the Buddha is seen as a doctor who has prescribed this medicine. And the Sangha is another Sanskrit word, which means the spiritual community, the friends, the people that support each other on the path. As we know, in all religions, are so important to just give us that inspiration, that support. But in this analogy, the Sangha are the nurses and those nurses are administering the medicine. They're caring for us. They're administering, encouraging us to take the medicine. Take that medicine 3 times a day. Maybe 5 times a day, whatever that prescription is. And the sangha, the spiritual friends of that particular tradition, are there to encourage us. Take your medicine, inspiring you. It's good. I feel better. I've taken my medicine today. And the main key point of Buddhism is that we're all sick. Well, every single one of us that isn't a liberated being has a sickness, and that's something. It's not like some people are sick and others are not. Everybody's sick. And the sickness is called the sickness of delusion, and they're called the 3 poisons. The root delusions are the 3 poisons. They poison our mind, they poison our soul, our consciousness, our body as well. And those 3 poisons are ignorance, attachment, and anger, or we could call it hatred. Okay? When we get into anger, we get into a little bit of difficulty because sometimes anger is necessary. Let's talk about the suffragettes, for example. Let's use them as an analogy. People that have fought and have got angry about injustice and have done something. Perhaps they've sacrificed their own lives in that fight. So we're not saying that those types of manifestations are wrong, but we're saying that sort of hatred, just hating people, hating other beings, is a poison. So the Buddha gave many different remedies for these poisons, such as the teachings on loving kindness, metta bhavana in Sanskrit. So, this is a common practice now in the modern world. We hear a lot about mindfulness. This is a norm. This is basically come from Buddhism. You could also argue a little bit from Hinduism, but this concept is very central to the Buddhist path. It's one of the eightfold path aspects. So there's 8 aspects to the Buddhist path. You've got right understanding, 1, right thought, 2, right speech, 3, right action, 4, right livelihood, 5, right effort, putting in the right effort, 5, 6. You've got mindfulness and concentration. So mindfulness is one of the eightfold path teachings. It's one of the 8 spokes of that wheel. And there's a wheel of Dharma that often is depicted as having 8 spokes. And that wheel of Dharma, it moves around. It doesn't always stay in one place. So sometimes the Dharma is flourishing in one area and then it'll move. Perhaps it gets, corrupted, or maybe it gets suppressed in some way. So it'll just move somewhere else. And I think at the moment in this sort of Western Europe, we've actually got a flourishing Dharma culture. There's lots and lots of places where you can practice Dharma authentically according to all the teachings of the lineage gurus, with freedom. No one's going to bother you. If you can pay your rent, you can, even if you can't, you can still practice Dharma. You can, like I used to hang out in a Georgian mansion, and I lived there for 7 years. Those of you from Shropshire will know a place called Attingham Park. So I used to live in a very similar building to that, looking out through the pillars out onto the gardens and the lake. And that was up in Yorkshire, a place called Madhyamaka Centre. Madhyamaka means middle way, a middle way centre in Sanskrit. So I was there for about 2 years before I became a monk, and then for 5 years studying intensely as a monk. Because I had the opportunity to. I had a difficult breakup with my partner, and didn't have any commitments, didn't have any children, didn't even have any pets like I've got now. There's one. So nothing to stop me focusing 100% on the Dharma, studying it, meditating on it, and teaching it. So, you have to first study. Study is so important. Reading, studying, and discussing as well. We used to memorize the root text of a teaching, then look at the commentary, then discuss. And if we've got any doubts, we talk about those doubts as well. Um, so this is how we practiced. Yeah.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So you're saying that from a Buddhist perspective, religion is seen as a method to get as like a as a finger pointing to the moon.
Yeah.
That analogy is a nice analogy. So from a Buddhist perspective, how would you describe the moon? Sort of, are there attributes of the moon, or is there, what do you mean by the moon exactly?
Yeah. So the moon would represent um, the ultimate truth. Okay, the non-dual reality. Um, so anything else that is not the non-dual reality is just pointing towards the moon. Only the moon itself is ultimate truth, what we call emptiness in Buddhism. Emptiness sounds very sterile, but actually it's the basis of everything. It's also known as shunya in Sanskrit. You know, it's like the void from which everything manifests.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
But
In the
obviously, you mean that as like an analogy, not like that the moon is the
Oh no,
ultimate.
no.
No, it's an
Moon, so yeah, just to
yeah,
clarify, the moon is just an analogy
yeah,
to represent something
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Um, we're not saying worship the moon, although there are people that do.
So that attribute of beauty, you mentioned the word beautiful.
Mm.
So what do you mean by beauty? So if religion is a method to
Mm.
help to reach a place of beauty, what do we mean by beauty from a Buddhist, from your understanding?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Hmm.
It doesn't exist actually
Mm.
outside, but then nothing does. Nothing exists from its own side, it's going into the profound teachings on ultimate truth.
Yeah.
Everything is a projection of the mind.
Hmm.
This is what the Buddha taught anyway. And it's also taught in Hinduism and Sikhism, this idea of Maya, everything being an illusion,
Hmm.
like a projection on the screen.
Yeah.
If you try and go out and eat the apple that you see on a cinema screen,
Hmm.
they'll cart you off, won't they?
Yeah.
We're reaching out into this world thinking everything's real and out there,
Mm.
and existing from its own side, but everything is dependent related.
Hmm.
It doesn't have any inherent existence. But
Hmm.
we can't expect to understand that without a huge amount of study and meditation. It won't make sense. I mean, to some extent it will, because everyone has their own version of reality, you know.
So
Um,
what you're saying is that depending on your religion, you're just looking at the moon or looking at truth from a different angle, from a different perspective. Uh,
hmm,
is it a little bit like a mountain and like different, you're saying there's different paths to the mountain, to the
that's
top?
the one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a nice analogy, because there are many ways up to the top of the mountain.
Mhm.
The top of the mountain is one. It doesn't matter how you get there.
Mhm.
It's the same. If you go up the north face, the east, the west, and it's like all these religions are sort of like different paths towards this top of the mountain,
Mhm.
and they've got their own way, you know. And the thing is that it's important to follow one way,
Mhm.
because if you keep switching, you'll only stay near the bottom. You'll keep switching guides, and then eventually you won't get to the top. I
So
mean,
would you say that it's even possible to reach the top?
well, I suppose it's a matter of faith, isn't it? Ultimately, if you have faith that others have done it, and their example and their teachings and their aura, if you've had the good fortune to meet a saint, I think I've met quite a few, I've been quite lucky.
Mhm.
And they have an aura, there's almost like a smell, a fragrance, not a smell, like a beautiful fragrance
Mhm.
that manifests from them. And your heart will tell you, but it's not something you can prove to anybody else.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
So is it a state, is it a state of being, would you say, that when you get to the top of the mountain, is it I'm just trying to understand, like it's really interesting to sort of get a Buddhist perspective on this. I guess, is that what you call enlightenment?
Yeah,
State of enlightenment? Is there a danger of when you get to that place? Is there any danger? And how do you mentioned in the beginning that actually sometimes it can go wrong. Can you
yeah,
please talk about how it can go wrong? If
yeah.
somebody that place of enlightenment.
Oh yes. I think at any point on the path, the ego can hijack the
Hmm.
spiritual path, and the stakes get higher the closer you get because people will start to notice that you've got something. Many of these gurus that we hear about that ended up falling or becoming a scandal around them, and it's very common. I mean, I could name names, like there's many, many names, but I'll restrain myself. But it's very, very common, and because maybe you have some power. If you've done a lot of meditation, you've done a lot of
Hmm.
work, maybe in a past life, maybe in this life,
Hmm.
then you could have an amazing aura, be very charismatic as well, and people will be attracted to you.
Hmm.
Partly because you've gone up towards that, and people can feel that you're higher up the mountain than they are, and they want to get up there. Oh yeah, he seems to be free. He seems to be blissful. Many like the Beatles, they got very disillusioned with their guru, and yet they were absolutely totally besotted with him for a long time, and he had all this aura of bliss and charisma and compassion and love and lots of wisdom. He knew so much, but you know, he was just one of many that disillusioned the Beatles. And
So you're saying that sometimes people end up like worshipping the gurus
yeah, big
as the
risk.
god, and obviously there's a huge responsibility
Yeah.
on those who have the responsibility of being a religious guide or spiritual leader. Um, How do you think this ties in with what we see happening in the world at the moment? And so many people are turning to atheism, they're losing faith in they don't want to be religious or have any path like that. How do you think that ties in with it with people losing faith?
The disillusionment with religion. Yeah. I think Buddhism is actually possibly the second biggest religion in the UK, and yet because you don't see Buddhists around, they don't particularly wear, apart from the monks and the ordained people, you won't notice that they're Buddhist. So people don't realize how many Buddhists there are. And actually, the spiritual vacuum that was created as the church seemed to diminish and people began to lose faith in the institutions to
Mm.
some extent, and there is a resurgence in Christianity,
Mhm.
um, but there has been a sort of a drop in it in the Western Europe, especially in Western Europe, and so in that void, Buddhism was very appealing, partly because you
Mhm.
could be an atheist and be a Buddhist, or you could be a theist.
Mhm.
Because it's not, and there's a
It's more
wonderful
a way of life. You're saying it's more of a way of life than a.
yeah, way of life, and there's a story that from the Buddha's time that Sadhguru Jaggi, he often talks this, tells this story. It's very short, and it's basically just two guys. One is a completely fanatical religious person that's
Mhm.
always talking about religion and trying to convince everybody else, and
Mhm.
is banging on about religion the whole time, and is certain that there's a God in
Mhm.
his mind, but just a tiny little 0.1% of doubt. And he hears there's an enlightened being who's very revered that's come to his area, so he goes to speak to the Buddha just to double check, because this guy seems to know what he's talking about, you know. And so he goes to the Buddha and he says, "Is there a God?" And the Buddha says, "No, there is no God." But on the same day, an atheist who was absolutely convinced, and you get people like this in India today that spend the whole life trying to, debunk religion.
Mhm.
Um, and he was one of those type of very, evangelical atheists, Richard Dawkins, people like this. So it's their life's mission to sort of debunk religion. So that kind of guy went to the Buddha the same day in the evening, and asked the Buddha, he knew there was no God in his mind, but he just wanted just 0.1% of doubt.
Mm.
So he went to the Buddha, is there a God? Guess what the Buddha said?
Yes,
Yeah,
there is.
there is a God, yes. So the Buddha was giving remedies for extreme views. And Buddhism is all about avoiding the extreme of existence, the extreme of non existence, the extreme of faith, the extreme of non faith, you know, um, or belief in a God. It's a belief, isn't it? We think we know there's a God, but we don't know that for sure until we know. You know when you know, don't you? And
Yeah,
that's
so you're
what
saying that it's that path of seeking higher wisdom, knowledge, understanding, always seeking truth um and seeking balance, I guess.
yeah.
Um, I guess it's interesting, isn't it? When you're on extreme one side, you don't see the whole picture. So
Mm,
it's important to look at both, different perspectives, isn't it, to
yeah.
get a clearer view of something.
Mm.
Um, oh, that's wonderful. So why do you think some people are trying to sort of attack religion and say religion is wrong or bad? What are your views about that?
I mean, throughout history, there's been more wars fought over religion than any other thing. I mean, there's been a lot of people have been killed as a result of atheism. People forget that.
Yeah.
Communist sort of, you know,
Would you say that atheism is a religion?
well, it can be. It can become like a religion. But I think a lot of people are very disillusioned, partly because it's also been shoved down their throat. It's been forced upon them, and they haven't had a choice. So, and people will obey while they're being whipped. But eventually, if they're given a bit of freedom, often they'll say, actually, I don't want this.
Yeah.
That's one reason perhaps why it is
That's
kind
a
of
really interesting point you've made. Yeah.
and
It reminds me of a verse in the Quran. It says that there's no compulsion in religion. So it's not something that can be forced upon somebody. Everybody's got the freedom to choose which path they want to follow. But obviously, but then you've got sort of, I think, what do we understand by religion? To me, I understand it as a set of rules. And obviously, we can all choose our own rules. But to what extent do we have to put rules in place in society to prevent chaos from happening? So, for example, driving on the street, if everybody was allowed to drive right or left, there'd be chaos. So, we have to have some rules, don't we, in society? Would you say that that's a type of religion or not?
yeah, I mean, I think all religions have got a set of guidelines
Mhm.
um, and to some extent rules. Um, but in Buddhism, it's slightly different. It's like, it's not thou shalt not. It's like, it would be better if you didn't.
Yeah.
But it's all the same stuff. It's like, don't kill, don't steal, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, hurtful speech,
So
idle
where,
gossip.
where do these come from?
This is the 10 non-virtuous actions. This is the main discipline of Buddhism. And
Yeah.
it's very similar in all the other religions.
It is exactly. It's
But
the
it's
thing which ties all the religions together, isn't it, really?
similar. Um, and there are lots and lots of rules, if you like, and there's rules for meditation, for example.
Mhm.
I go to a Zen Buddhist center sometimes in Telford, and the first thing we do is rules for meditation. It's not like suggestions. They've used the word rules because if you don't follow those rules, it won't work.
Really? So is that what it, because you do get this in religion, in organized religion, you get, people, it divides into sects. So there's different sects, and then within each sect, they have these different rules. And
Yeah.
we each of, and they sort of impose these though upon people and say, for example, you have to pray like this,
Mm,
or some say you have to pray like this. But actually, if what you're saying is, it's not the actual rule itself, it's where it's supposed to get you
mm,
that matters, then really does it matter if you put your finger here or there, or if you do it this way or that way? Surely it's about the mindfulness and about where it's supposed to help you become a better person or better version of yourself. What
mm.
do you think?
Yeah, it makes me think of a analogy from the time of Buddha where there was bickering monks who were
Mhm.
bickering over exactly how to clean their begging bowl.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens, isn't it, in religion?
It's like, no, the Buddha said to do it this way. Yeah, but the Buddha said to do it that way. And in the end, they were bickering endlessly and
And then
fighting.
they end up breaking the big rule, which is to, it's about peace, isn't
The
it?
minutiae of the rules and the sort of petty details, people can fight over that. And they
Yeah,
miss the point.
the big point. And I think I see that happening in all of these organized, religions. And it's a shame, really, isn't it? Because we lose we lose clarity on the actual purpose of it. And like you say, we end up saying my religion is better than your religion, or this way is better than that way. And
Yeah.
then you end up having war, and then you end up breaking the values and the principles that actually the religion is supposed to teach.
I think there's, from Hinduism's point of view and Buddhism's point of view, there's a reason why this is happening, and
Mhm,
it's because, or one suggestion is that it's because there's no teaching on past and future lives.
mhm,
So when that's gone, then it becomes such an imperative that you're right, because if you're not right, you're going to hell forever, and you're going to get tormented for eternity. Now that's very threatening, it's very frightening. Now, don't get me wrong, in Buddhism it also talks about heavens and hells. And due to our negative actions, we can go to a lower rebirth and we can experience a hellish state, but it's not forever. That's the sort of nicer bit of it, or not nicer, but slightly less terrifying. And again, but it's a belief system. Some Buddhists don't believe in heaven and hell, and that's fine. And some do. Like the Tibetans actually have got quite a, it's like a Stephen King book. If you look at some of the hells that there are and the states of hell and how much you get punished and tortured in hell, it makes Stephen King look like reading, honestly. So don't let them off the hook as well, because they're also teaching it. And it is a way of getting people to behave
mhm,
and control people,
mhm,
um, and make sure that they don't stray from the path. It's like a carrot and a stick, and that's a very big stick. It's like, don't stray off the path. But
mhm.
here's a carrot. If you are good and you follow the path and you follow the religion, these are all the benefits you'll get. So it's carrot and stick, and even in Buddhism we have that.
Yeah, and I can actually see wisdom in it.
Yeah.
I know it puts a lot of people off. Religion is the fear factor that sometimes is used. They open one of the books and it talks about hell, and they're like, I'm not going to be made to feel afraid to do something. And that can cause all sorts of feelings. But actually, I've reflected on that, and I think if sometimes it can be a good thing, because so many, for example, if you take religion out of it and just look at the rules of society, how many people would break the rules and drive on the right if there wasn't a punishment for it, if you weren't going to get caught by the police to go through the red lights. So it is a deterrent, and it does help things run more smoothly, and it does teach people a lesson to
Mm.
try to stick to the rules and treat each other how you want to be treated. But then there's a higher level, isn't there? There's always you peel away the outside, and then you get the carrot then. But why what was I going to say? Um got it now. Oh, what I wanted to talk about is the ask you about is this the moon. I think it's a really lovely analogy, and I wanted to ask you, do you think that all human beings, no matter what their religion, their labels, their outer identities, or paths that they choose to follow, do you think there's a place where we can all, where what we all have in common, um, inside within us? And how would you describe that place? What can unite us?
It reminds me of that quote from, is it Rumi? I think it's like, there's a field, in the place between good and bad, or good and evil. There's a field. I'll meet you there. And that's
Yes,
what.
let's talk about that place.
Yeah.
How
So
does how does from the Buddhist perspective, how would you describe that place if you could? I know you said it's indescribable or it's, but if we could describe it using words or feelings or attributes, how would we describe that place, that meeting place?
Hmm. um, well, Ramdas says that there's only one of us here in drag.
Mm,
The many people that we see are all manifestations of the divine.
mhm,
You know,
Yeah.
the good ones, the bad ones, the beautiful ones, the not so beautiful ones, the polite ones, the rude ones. They're all just part of this tapestry, this, huge tapestry that we're all part of, and that's how we're all one. His guru Neem Karoli Baba always used to say sub ek,
Mhm.
everything is one. You know, um, but you say that to a group of activists, so that, they'll have your head off.
Mhm.
Don't give me that rubbish. You know, we've got to fight these people. These there's some bad people over there. We've got to sort them out. And they're ruining it for everybody else, or they're oppressing, or they're doing this or that. And yes, and all that's true, but that's all on the level of relative truth.
Yes,
Sometimes you've
yes.
got to drop that and just see beyond the role that people are playing, because we're all souls playing a role.
Mhm.
You know, um, if you're in a drama with someone and they're playing the bad guy and you're playing the good guy, you know, when you've stopped acting, you drop the roles and you just have a nice chat, and you don't take it personally that they just tried to kill you or what have you. And if you understand a little bit of ultimate truth, then you see that everyone is a soul, and that is part of God, or it's part of the Buddha mind. There's only one mind, one consciousness, and we're all manifestations of that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I completely agree with that. However, I think I personally believe there's something we have to strive towards something. We have a choice in evil and good might be with.
Relative, yeah.
Yeah. But and I believe as well as a Muslim that there is no reality other than
Mm.
truth or God and ultimate truth. But and we're all manifestations of that in different ways. Um, but there's a desired place, isn't there? There's a place that we all desire to go. I think I don't know. I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to understand from other people's perspectives. Are we all desiring to go to that same place? You know.
Well, there are lots of pure lands and heavens in the Buddhist teachings, but ultimately they are not really, well, certainly the heaven realms are not somewhere you actually want to aspire to go. You want to actually aspire to go beyond that and
Yeah.
to achieve nirvana. So we've all heard the word nirvana. There's quite a lot of nightclubs called nirvana these days. I don't think they lead to nirvana.
Tell us what's Nirvana.
Nirvana means just a cessation. It's a complete cessation of all suffering and the causes of suffering. Buddha said there's four noble truths: true sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. If you follow the true path, you know, you'll achieve a true cessation of suffering, and you'll uproot the origins of suffering, which is the ego grasping mind, that sense of clinging at me as a separate being. Once you've done that, then you'll just merge with the one. But that takes a lot of softening and soft, because we've got this very hard sense of our separate self. This is me, this is me. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, whatever it is. And we cling to that, and everybody does, and that's normal. But it's also like a lower level of evolution. Just like the animals, they think, I'm the most important one, except for this cat. She's a bit special. But even, she has to kill mice, and do you think she's more important than mice? They have to die for her.
So yeah, so it's all about the identity and sort of having an identity, and you're saying that we desire deep within us to lose our identity and be merged with the ultimate
Mm.
oneness. But is that really the place where we really desire, or should we be there as a human being, or is it that we're supposed to have an identity in order to stay slightly away from that, so that we can, you know,
Mm.
be in that place of balance with sort of
Yeah.
where we can sort of, I guess, connect the spiritual side of us with the physical,
Yeah.
so the delusion with the ultimate truth.
Mm.
Do you
I,
think
I,
that's
I know what
possible?
you're saying. Yeah, I think I know. It makes me think of the Hare Krishna movement, actually, because they only want to be a servant of God. They don't actually want to merge with God completely and dissolve that separate identity, because they want to remain as a servant.
Yes,
So they,
exactly. To be a servant, you have to have a master, and in
idea,
order to,
if you like. But I
yeah,
think, in a way, by becoming a pure devotee,
Mhm.
pure bhakta and a pure das, as the word das in Sanskrit means to be a servant, and Ramdas would be a servant of God. Ram is a name of God, in Hinduism. If you really can master that, then in a way you'd be liberated anyway, but within that form. So you'd be
Beautiful.
liberated while alive. You wouldn't have to dissolve and just become nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. So you
Realize
can
you were kind of nothing in a way, but you were also everything.
exactly that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, Amazing. Wow, what a great conversation. And I didn't actually know much about the Buddhist perspective, so it's really nice to to have you here. So thank you so much and teaching us all about that. Um, yeah, so religion as a method, and let's all try and take a step back from assuming that our religion is the only and right way and that others are wrong, because then we fall into that I'm better than you mentality, which actually is goes against all the teaching of all of the major religions, because it's about the ego, isn't it? And I think a lot of what's happening in the world is probably because of that. And it puts people off religion, and whereas religion actually has we can use it as a tool to do so much good. But unfortunately, sometimes we choose it to as a tool to cause harm to others and bring injustice to the world. Um, so thank you so much. Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you found this helpful. And looking forward to uh, doing this again soon. Thank you. Namaste. Peace be with you.
Namaste.
Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam. Thank you.